Here we go then, this is part 3 of Dueling Shaskas. The last video finished on a bit of a cliffhanger. I've just lost half of my available tanks doing a Marshal Ney impersonation on the right flank, and now that my options are limited, the enemy is definitely pushing hard into my left. I don't know exactly what the enemy is going to do over on the left. He's got plenty of options, but he seems to be moving quite slowly and without any infantry support, and I want to take advantage of that. I don't see any advantage in attacking him there. I'll be exposing myself when he's coming to me at his own pace, so I'm just going to hold off on the left hand flank and keep hammering his right. I think everything went wrong on the right with my tanks the last time because I was too impatient and generally made a mess of it. This time I'm going to give it the proper combined arms treatment and try and do it properly. First though, there are some enemy reinforcements on the other side of the railway line on the right who are starting to push up into my remaining forces up there. This tank is the one that was abandoned after it got hit by an RPG. The crew are cowering in a field somewhere, but the enemy coming up has mistaken it for an active vehicle and starts to pour fire into it. It's a good display of firepower. This is automatic grenade launcher fire hitting the tank now to go along with the cannon fire from before. This indicates that the enemy is nice and close. My immobilized tank is a little way behind the abandoned one, and the enemy is so distracted that they don't spot it until it's far too late. In the next minute though, while it's concentrating towards its front, an enemy BTR-4 going for the centre knocks it out with a missile. In the meantime, I've carefully brought up the two tanks I had on overwatch on the right flank, and they're now in position as the enemy crosses the railway line. As you can see, I've got the tank commanders up out of their hatches for some better close range all around visibility. This is a little risky, but it's to make sure that I get the drop on the enemy at what are effectively spitting distances, and that my tank commander isn't looking through some 16 times magnification scope when he should be looking at what's right in front of him. Two more BTR-4s get comprehensively wrecked by the main guns and 12.7mm MGs on the tanks. Even the dismounted survivors from the abandoned tank join in to take some pot shots at fleeing enemy crewmen. I've moved my motor rifle infantry up with those two tanks, and they've dismounted before starting to advance through this field towards the buildings at the top of the hill. There are probably some enemy infantry from that wrecked enemy BTR-4 platoon hanging around in those buildings, and I don't want my BMP-3s to get up too close where they can get RPG'd with my infantry still inside them. That's why they've dismounted quite a way out and they're going to fire and manoeuvre up. The BMP-3s are putting plenty of fire out to keep the enemy's heads down. The infantry are taking turns to move up or fire, and even the tanks are putting the odd round into those buildings. While all of this is going on, the enemy is advancing slowly but steadily over on the left. He's across the river and he's starting to move up the hill. My BMP-3s and infantry in the town are either out of range or not heavily armed enough to contest the crossing. All I've got to immediately deal with this is this T-90, which I'm slipping down into this hollow in the woods. Hopefully it's going to act as a nasty ambush / speed bump to slow the enemy up long enough for my attack on the right to succeed. My ATGMs are trying to redeploy to the left, but an unspotted enemy tank on the other side hits them with an airburst round. They're okay, but they're very shaken up. They get into position properly a little later, spot the tank and try to return the favour, but the laser dazzling equipment on the enemy vehicle spoofs all their missiles and they never get a hit. The tank, on the other hand, pinpoints them and puts another airburst right on top of them. Over in the hollow, the first enemy tank is trying to edge past the woods. My tank spots, engages and destroys it at point blank range. Another enemy tank starts to move in. My T-90 gets the drop on this one as well. This is the time where the enemy should be using his infantry to creep up and destroy or drive off my tank in the woods, but the infantry platoon that he's assigned to this flank got wasted early on by this very T-90. and as a result he's trying to clear out the woods the hard way with his armour. On comes a third tank. My T90 fires and hits a tree to zero effect. The enemy fires back, spalling, wastes my tank commander. My gunner ignores it and gets a last desperate round off. The crew have had enough. They've taken out 3 enemy tanks at spitting distance and they've lost their tank commander and they're pulling back up out of the hollow. They've done more than I ever expected them to against all the odds. The enemy attack on the left has been totally decimated. The enemy was obviously relying heavily on the armoured push, and now that it's been blunted over on the left, the tank on overwatch up on the valley side is dashing off over to the right along with what looks like all the infantry it can scrounge up. It gets a snapshot off while it's on the move and knocks out one of my T90s over on the far right, but this is pretty desperate stuff really. I've got the enemy reacting to me, and as soon as my forces catch sight of that incoming T-84 they're going to wreck it. As it rolls down the road it has to slow down to pass a knocked out tank, and one of my BMP3s in the field fires a missile at it. It misses, hitting the tank wreck instead, but that distracts the enemy tank long enough for my surviving T90 on the right to put a hole straight through it. A few seconds later the ammunition cooks off. Confirmed kill. Some ragtag enemy infantry or vehicle crews are trying to follow the tank over to the right, but as they go they start getting hammered by my fire support and the effort peters out. My mortars finally start falling, my infantry is getting close, the enemy has taken heavy casualties and he finally surrenders. The enemy has lost 11 tanks and 18 armoured vehicles. He's taken 151 casualties overall, 127 of which are dead, and he only has 56 men and vehicle crewmen still in the fight. Those casualty figures might seem a little bit off. Usually you'd expect to see more wounded than dead, but most of those enemy casualties are enemy infantry platoons who didn't get a chance to deploy out of their BTR-4s. And given that they were sat in a confined space surrounded by fuel and ammunition getting shot at with some very powerful weaponry, it's not surprising that none of them got out of their vehicles once they got hit. Something else to bear in mind is that because I've got the battlefield at the end of the day, giving medical assistance to the enemy wounded is way down on the priority list. A lot of the casualties who could potentially have survived simply wouldn't have got any medical treatment whatsoever. On my side, I've lost 27 dead and 3 wounded. Those are almost all T90 and BMP3 crews who don't have that much of a chance if their vehicle gets hit. All of my infantry is totally fine, and if the enemy hadn't surrendered, I'd still be in a position to keep on going. That's it for Dueling Shaskas then, guys. I said at the start I expected this to be over in 30 minutes one way or the other. The enemy surrendered at the end of minute 32. Comment, rate and subscribe. Let me know what you guys would have done differently, what you think I did wrong, where you think I got lucky. I want to get on with playing against a human opponent at some point, which is an entirely different kind of challenge. But in the meantime, guys, if you've got anything that you want to see, let me know. This is a huge game with a lot of stuff in it. I haven't done any night fighting, there hasn't been any electronic warfare, no air support, I haven't shown much infantry combat or urban warfare, I haven't defended yet. Most of all, I haven't played as or against the Americans. And if you want to see any of that stuff, let me know and I'll see what I can do. I've really enjoyed this, guys. I hope you lot have as well. I'll see you in the next video.